Hey everyone. So today we're going to be going over inequalities. I'm going to do a short review of all the symbols and what they mean and then go into it. So just so that we have all of our symbols here. So this one is greater than. This is exactly what it means. It's greater than, less than, greater than, or equal to. This one is less than or equal to. And if you're not really sure which one to use ever, just remember that the open side, the mouth, is always going to go to the bigger number. I was taught to think of this as like the hungry alligator, and the alligator always wants to go for the bigger fish. So if you want to draw little teeth in your signs, go for it. Just remember that the mouth always wants to go to the bigger number. Okay. So here, now that we've gotten this, also when you're graphing, the greater than and the less than are going to have empty circles. The greater than and equal to are going to have the filled in circles. So the reason for this is because with the greater than or equal to, that's the big part, it can equal the number that you're comparing. So it's fine if it's that number, or it could be bigger or less. That's why we have it filled in. That means we're including that number. Whereas like greater than or less than, we're not necessarily including that number. So we're not going to fill it in. This is just telling us, hey, we're starting at this number, but we're not including it. So here, let's say we wanted to do, I don't know. We already did this one. Let's do this one. So let's create our inequality. So when we're creating our inequality, what we need to know here is three things. We need to know what is happening. So this is the thing that's happening, the thing that's an action, something that you need to do, something that the person needs to do. It's active. This one is the total. So this is like the total of something that you have. There's not really much to do with it. It just kind of is. So here, a marine submersible descends more than 40 feet below sea level. As it descends from the sea level, the change in elevation is negative 5 feet per second. For how many seconds does it descend? Okay, so the first thing I usually look for is the total. Oh, and this is the inequality sign. So the first thing I'm going to look for is the total. We know that the marine submersible descends more than 40 feet below sea level. So 40 feet below sea level, that kind of, it's already happened, right? It's already descended this much. There's nothing I can do about it. It's just a fact. So that means that I'm going to put the 40 here, but remember it's below sea level. So it would be negative. Yeah. So it would be negative 40 because it's below sea level. That's kind of a real world interpretation here. When you're reading this stuff, you have to think, okay, is this a positive value or a negative value? Because not all values are positive, like what we see here. In this case, it's a negative value because it's below sea level. And then as it descends from the sea level, the change in elevation is negative 5 feet per second. So the two things we have here is negative 5 and seconds. Now, this is an action. It's currently changing in elevation, negative 5 feet per second. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That is an action. That is something that's happening, right? So, and then the inequality sign, it says that it's going down in elevation. So right now, this is where we're at, and we're only going to go lower. If you're going any lower than 40, negative 40, that means you're becoming smaller and smaller, right? That means no matter what, this side is only getting smaller and smaller. So we're going to put this to show that negative 40 is as high as we get, and it's only going to get smaller from there. Remember, the big side opens to the bigger number. We're only going to be descending more and more and more and more, right? So here, we're going to put negative 5, and we're going to put s. Now, we don't know the operation that goes in between them. The way that we know the operation that goes in between them is this. Addition, multiplication, subtraction, division. Now, at 1 second, it'll be what? Negative 10 feet. At, I don't know, 4 seconds. I'm just picking random seconds here to kind of just see what I'm doing in my head. It's going to be negative 20 seconds. Why did I say 10 seconds here? That's supposed to be 5. For those of you who called me out and said I was wrong when I first wrote that, good for you. If you didn't, don't worry, I made that same mistake. So at 4 seconds, it would be 20. I don't know, at 10 seconds, it would be 50. All right. So the reason I'm doing this is because a lot of times when we read a problem in our head, we already kind of know what we're supposed to be doing. We kind of already have an idea of what's going on. And we, in our brains, without even really thinking about it, solve it. We know what's happening. So by just doing that for myself, saying, okay, at 4 seconds, I'd be at negative 20, 10 seconds, I'd be at negative 50. So like, I'm already predicting my depth, how much I've descended, depending on the seconds. How did I do that? We now have to dissect what we did. Well, I just multiplied by negative 5. Honestly, that's all I did. Well, I don't like putting x there. Multiply by negative 5. So, since I'm multiplying, it looks like the operation between these two is multiplication. And now we have our inequality. So just like that, if you're not sure about what operation to put on this left side, maybe just make a couple scenarios. Okay, what will happen if I mess around with the variable a little bit? What happens at 1 second? What happens at 4? What happens at 10? And what am I doing every single time to figure out these numbers? So a lot of times we already know what's going on. We just need to dissect how we're doing it. That's why showing work is really important. I'm going to move this over. That's not what I wanted. There we go. Move this over there. Sure. So we have this right here. That's our new inequality. So let's solve it. So here we have negative 5 times s is less than negative 40. Now, if you want to move something from one side to the other side, which we do because we want to solve for s, we have to do the opposite of what it was originally doing. In this case, it was originally multiplying, so we're going to divide by negative 5. So we had s, and then we have negative 40 divided by, that's not a 40, divided by negative 5. Ugh. And then we have to remember our special inequality rule. I went over it in class, hopefully you wrote it down, but if you don't, write it down now. Because if you don't know this, you're going to get almost every single inequality question wrong. If at any point you had to multiply by or divide by a negative number to solve the inequality, and that's like your SADMEP stuff. You remember SADMEP? We divided to do the opposite stuff. what was I saying? Something inequality. You have to flip the inequality sign. So when I'm saying SADMAP, I mean like you remember you have to do the opposite in order to move stuff from one side to the other side. That's SADMAP stuff. So that means that this turns into that. The less than sign turns into the greater than sign. So S is greater than negative 40 divided by negative 5. 40 divided by 5 is 8. Negative divided by negative is positive. So S is greater than 8. That means that the marine submersible was doing its thing for like more than 8 seconds. Now, if we were to graph this, the way you graph it is you take your number, 8. You take your symbol. Now, that remember, our greater than symbol will have an empty circle. And then S has to be greater than 8. So all the numbers greater than 8 are on the right side of 8. So there you go. And that's it. So remember, when you're graphing, we start with the number. We make a circle based on what kind of sign it is. In this case, we needed an empty circle to show that we're starting at 8, but we're not including 8. And then it says S is greater than 8. So all the numbers greater than 8 are on the right of 8. Remember, the number line goes bigger as you move to the right, smaller as you move to the left. So if it's greater than 8, you're moving to the right. Okay, let's try another one. Get out of my shot. So let's try one of these. Okay. So again, I'm taking a real world problem and I'm going to try to turn it into an inequality and then solve it and graph it. So I'm going to take my 3 parts. So first I'm going to do is total. Oh, that's not useful. Total. Inequality sign. What is happening? Okay, so let's start with our total. The vet says that Lena's puppy will grow to be at most 28 inches tall. Lena's puppy is currently 1 foot tall. How many more inches will the puppy grow? Okay, so right here, Lena's puppy is currently 1 foot tall. It's currently that, but it still has to grow, right? We see here to be at most 28 inches tall. That's just a fact. It is going to be that tall at most, right? There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's 28 inches. It's not going to change. So that's going to be our total. But here, though currently 1 foot tall, it's not always going to be 1 foot tall. It's going to grow. So that's what's happening. It's starting at 1 foot and it's going to grow to be taller. How much taller? We don't know. At least enough to get it to 28 inches. So we have 1 foot, and then how much it's going to grow, I'll put it as G. Now here's the thing. This question here is very tricky because this is 28 inches, but this is 1 foot. You cannot mix up units like that. You have to either make them both feet, or you're going to make both of them inches. Currently, I really like turning feet into inches because it's easier than going from inches to feet. I like multiplying better than dividing. So there's 1 foot is 12 inches. So if it's currently 1 foot tall, that means it's 12 inches tall. So it's currently 12 inches tall. I know it's going to grow. So the way to get from here to here is some amount of growth. And the inequality sign, it will be at most. So that means that it can be 28 inches, but it's not going to be much bigger. It can be smaller, but it won't be bigger. So usually when you see the word at most, you're thinking about this sign. So to get from here to here, my growth, I have to add it to my height, right? The current height of my dog, or Lena's dog, puppy, plus however much it's going to grow, is going to give me at most 28. So now that I've gotten this, I need to solve it. So I have 12 plus G, 28. Okay. So again, if I'm solving inequalities, I just need to make my variable alone. So this 12 needs to go. Originally, this 12 was adding, so now I gotta subtract. So G is greater than or equal to 28 minus 12 is 16. I didn't have to multiply or divide, so I don't have to worry about my special rule. So G is greater than 16, or greater than or equal to 16. Yes. Wait a minute. That's not correct. Sorry, this should have been less than. I had a brain fart. Sorry about that. So the reason why it has to be less than is because... Oh, let me change this. My thinking was right. The symbol I used for it was wrong. It'll be at most 28. It's not going to be any bigger than this. So it's always going to be smaller than this or equal to this. The words I was saying was correct. The symbol I chose was wrong. This is telling you that this side, this left side, will always be smaller or equal to this side. Originally, when I had it the other way, this was saying that the right side would be bigger. Remember, the open side is saying that that side is bigger. So we want the right side to be bigger because at this point, it's not going to be above 28. So sorry about that. So that means that G is less than or equal to 16. Let's graph it. So here, again, when we're graphing, we're going to start at the number they gave us. In this case, they give us less than or equal to, so we know that that is a filled-in circle. And then G has to be less than 16, so all the numbers less than 16 are there. So there we go. That's really it for today. If you have any more questions, we can go over this more in class, but it's pretty much the same thing every time. You're always going to be making these three parts. What is happening? What's the inequality sign? What's the total? And remember, the total is always just going to be something that's a fact. It's not going to change no matter what you do about it. There's nothing really to do about it. Lena's puppy will grow to be at most 28 inches tall. There's nothing you can do about that. If you didn't want that number, you should have gotten a different puppy. But Lena's puppy is currently 1 foot tall and it needs to grow more. That's an action. That's something that's going to continue to happen. It's constantly changing. That number is going to change. Lena's puppy is not always going to be 1 foot tall. I mean, it'd be really cute if it did, but no. So that's why it's in the what is happening. And we know that it's going to grow some amount of inches. So we put G here and added it to it because, you know, growing is you're adding to the height. You're not taking away from the height. You're not multiplying the height. You're not dividing the height. And then once you get there, you graph it. You solve it using SADMAP. So you're doing the opposite operations. And then you graph. So that's it for today.